Right, this is FAQ number 5. In the recording that I put up on YouTube of me playing Billie Jean, replete with crotch grab and oranges and all, people always ask how I make the little DJ scratch pad type noise by scraping my fingers across the guitar just there. Basically, I'm just scratching the wood of my guitar, and as I scratch across the wood, because wood has a grain, you get a sort of washboard rhythmic effect as you scrape the nail across. Now, to do this, I found that I actually need quite a thick nail, so I'm using the acrylic nails that I covered in a previous FAQ, and it's not really that long at the moment. It's slightly shorter than it perhaps normally would be for most of my playing techniques, because I found that if you have a slightly shorter, thick thumbnail, it gets the best sound. So for this video, I've just filed it down a bit and smoothed it off, although it's still longer than, you know, having it completely down to the nail bed. To do this, you are going to scratch your guitar. No two ways about it. There are various ways which you can stabilise the wood. On this guitar, I've actually applied superglue, low viscosity superglue, so it's very thin. And after I've been doing it for a while, I just got a little bit of superglue, applied it onto the areas where I was scratching. It sunk into the wood, stabilised the lacquer, and basically stopped me from drilling a hole in my guitar. Now, if you look at someone like, I don't know, Willie Nelson, his old guitar, he's played it for years and years, he's been strumming hard, and you can see that he's just literally drilled away bits of the guitar with his strumming. And that's what you will do to your guitar. You just wear away a hole if you don't stabilise it somehow. It's more destructive with the acrylic nail, probably, but if you put superglue on, then it's pretty much solid and it's not going to wear away at all, really. I did this on a couple of guitars. The first one I tried it on was a Takamine Santa Fe, which is behind me. We're going to take a look at that in a moment. It wasn't ideal because it had a cutaway, and the technique kind of feels best if you're moving your hand in this direction, so where the cutaway would have been on that guitar. And then got the Avalon just here, which is my main guitar, and that's the one I've been using for about 2 years now. And then when I went to Glastonbury Festival as a spectator, I bought a cheap little vintage guitar, and basically I just sanded it down and scraped away a bit of the wood and made the scratch pad kind of artificially quick, because I had to get the guitar ready to go before I'd actually had a chance to really play it in, if that makes sense. You get a slightly different sound depending on where you're actually doing it. If you do it over here, it's a very rich, deep sound. And as you get further up towards the sides of the guitar, it becomes more high pitch. That's exaggerated by the fact that I actually have the superglue more around this area and not so much around this area. And I don't know, you can do this pretty much anywhere. I found that around there works best, partly influenced by Eric Roche, of course, because he was my teacher, and he was the first person I really saw doing that scratch pad type effect, and just there. And then you have people like Tommy Emmanuel, who have been doing various sort of scratchy things, and if you look at his guitar, just see he's got a massive worn away patch just there. Thomas Leeb is an interesting one. He's using the scratch pad effect, and he uses it on, I think, Desert Pirate quite a lot right at the beginning of the track, and he actually has a bit of wood which he stuck onto the guitar just there, so he's not actually going to wear through his guitar because he's got another bit of wood, and I can see quite a lot of advantages to doing that. So you might want to check out some of his videos and look at what he's actually doing with that, because it seems like quite a good idea. But just as a raw thing, you could do it straight onto the guitar. Now we're going to have a look at a couple of the other guitars behind me through the magic of editing. Okay, now my Avalon isn't the only guitar that I actually have done this technique on. My very first guitar that was actually decent was Takamine Santa Fe 97 edition, which is behind me just here. So on the little lizard motif on. It's got a spruce top, Koa wood sides, and it got a relatively thick lacquer on it. So in my experience, it hasn't taken quite so gracefully to the scratching technique. Because I had a cutaway, I couldn't do the scratching just here, where I feel it's actually probably best to do it. And I ended up doing it just here, sort of underneath, which was always a little bit awkward, moving my hand up and down whilst I was strumming. It just didn't feel right. It kind of just flaked away and took chunks of wood with it as it scratched up, so it didn't work quite so well. We'll have a closer look. I'll bring the camera in so you can look at all of the detail there and see what you think. Spruce tops can work, but you've got to think about the lacquer. Okay, this guitar I got relatively cheaply. I think it was about £75. It's a VS 300. No, Justin. It's a V300 by Vintage. Pretty cheap, quite nice guitar. Probably the nicest guitar I found for under £300 or £400. So if you are looking for a small-bodied, nice guitar, quite a good one to go for. It's got quite a heavily lacquered top, again, spruce, and I just got some sandpaper, sanded away the area that I wanted to make into a scratch pad, and then got a nail, literally a metal nail, and ran it along the grain of the wood to quickly exaggerate the effect of the scratch pad, and then sand it down a bit more. A little bit more brittle sanding than the Avalon for various reasons. Different guitar, different size, different type of wood, and a thicker lacquer. So all of those add up to make a bit of a different sound. But it does prove that you can do this on pretty much any guitar. And if you do have a cheap guitar that you're not particularly fond of, then you can maybe sandpaper down the lacquer a bit and get down to the wood. You are going to wear everything away if you do that, but if it's a cheap guitar and you're not worried about that, that's all good. Now to do this technique, I'm just scratching my thumbnail across the area just here. If you have a natural thumbnail, you probably find it digs in quite a lot because it's very thin, and you're probably going to break your nail if you do this. So I have a fairly thick thumbnail. I can't quite see the screen, so I don't know if that's going to focus. But thick thumbnail. Check out the acrylic nail video if you're curious about how to do that. You can see that my guitar is pretty worn in the section just here. Superglue's been applied to the main section just there, so you still get the scratchy noise, and then change as you move further away. If you're going to do this, be careful when you come off the guitar just there, because you do tend to whack the nail bed of your thumb, and that hurts like hell. So I found this works really well with kind of funk strumming patterns, just using the standard James Brown kind of Sex Machine chord just there, which is 7, 6, 7, 7, 7. And then just get your standard sort of funk rhythms going, right hand moving constantly, and left hand obviously doing the muting, we won't go to that now, and doing the scratching just there. Okay, loads of fun to be had with that. You can do it in all kinds of songs, so you can take, I don't know, standard Green Day sort of stuff. Pretty much anything that you can imagine. As long as you've got the freedom to move your hand down there a little bit when you're doing the strumming, you'll be fine. Now when I do the strumming, I put my finger and my thumb together like that, so they're kind of reinforcing each other, and to some extent I use the back of my fingernail as I'm going down as well, and the back of my thumb as I'm coming up. Sort of like you would do if you were strumming with your fingers rather than a plectrum. I think that Eric Roche, when he did it, just used his thumb like that. I can see advantages to that, because you can whip around really, really quickly with that, but I've never been able to get it to sound quite right. It sounds a little bit too light when I do it like that, although when he did it, it sounded perfect. So different strokes, and you're just going to find a way that works for you. Might not be just here, might be just here. You could also try it up here. You can hear the lacquer hasn't worn away there yet, and as I move across, you kind of get this sickening, scraping kind of breaking sort of noise as I push the lacquer into the wood. There are probably some people who are watching this who are cringing at the thought of scratching up their guitars. But it does sound really cool, and it's a fun technique to do. Who needs a beatbox when you've got a guitar?